Hi guys, I'm October, but you can call me Toby. Thanks for coming to spend some time with me today. I want to try out something different today. A few weeks ago I watched Spilled Ink sculpt their channel mascot out of air dry clay, and that was really inspiring for me. I wanted to give that a go myself. Their channel mascot is called Ichika, and he is a little strawberry themed squid. So today I'll be attempting to sculpt Ichika. Spilled Ink used air dry clay to make their sculptures, but I'm going to use this polymer clay. I've had it for a little while. It's a little bit old, but it should be completely workable. I'll also use some aluminum foil, and I have these sculpting tools. Aside from this paint knife, they're actually fondant sculpting tools. I used to make cakes for a little while, so I had fondant sculpting tools, but I never had clay sculpting tools. But these work perfectly fine. The only tools I'd like to add would be some silicone tipped brushes for smoothing and getting into small areas. That would be really good. I'm just going to make a little ball out of my aluminum foil, and that's going to be the body for my Ichika. I don't want to have to use a whole wad of clay for this. It'll take forever to bake, and it's just a bit wasteful to use that much clay when I can fill it with aluminum foil. It also won't be so heavy with aluminum foil in the center. I love polymer clay. You can see it's leaving like a residue on my desk here. So it does leave like I wouldn't say sticky or oily residue. It's a little bit of both, but it's not very messy. A little bit of soapy water and it just cleans right off. So I find it's an excellent clay to use if you may have to drop everything and suddenly run to take care of a small child or some other type of emergency. And that's why it's become one of my preferred clays to use in the past couple years. Before this, I only really used air dry clay, paper clay. I had this really foamy paper clay which I love, but it doesn't have as good a working time as polymer clay. I even leave this overnight and come back to it the next evening to keep working on it, and it's still completely workable. It can dry out a little bit, but with a little bit of kneading, the clay itself just becomes completely workable again. You can see all the imperfections so much better on camera than with your eye, so I'm just going to fill some of those in now. So I'm pretty happy with this overall shape. It's not perfectly symmetrical or anything, but I do need to decide where I want to put the face, and once I'm happy with the face, once I have an idea of where I want the face, I'm going to make some little ears, I suppose I'll call them. They're just sort of a pyramid shape. I'm going to slope them off a little bit. Yeah, I don't know if these actually are ears or what they would be considered on a squid, but I'm going to call them ears. So that's my little ears I've made up. I'm going to position them on the body now, about where I want them. I'm liking the positioning here, so I'm just going to manipulate them a little bit, and now I'm going to smooth them onto the body, attach them fully, and remove those seams. Lots of smoothing happening on the body and the ears, and I just keep manipulating the shape because as I'm smoothing, I'm changing the shape, so I just keep working on that shape. Now I'm going to decide how I want to do these little tentacles for Ichika. This one's just a little bit little and thin, so I'm going to thicken that up, add a bit more clay. And I like how thick that looks. So let's make some more or less even balls of clay to make up these 8 tentacles. I want them to be quite short and stubby, really cute, so that they are similar to the references I've got of Ichika. I'm loving this ear positioning. I love that they're not perfectly even. They're like a little bit tilted, like there's a little bit of expression already happening with the character. I'm just going to pop these on and see if I'm happy enough with them to go ahead with attaching them. And I don't have room for the 8th one, so I'm going to take them off, and I'm going to cut the bottom edges off so that I can create more of it's really reminding me of a flower. If I wanted to make a pointy flower, like a daisy style thing, I'd do it like this. I'm happy with how they're sort of sitting around Ichika, so I'm going to shorten them up a little bit more, make them nice little thick tentacles for him. And now I'm going to attach him. So I did make a divot here and thought he might sit into that, so the tentacles would look like they're kind of pulled up around his body a little bit. But he was going to be sitting too deep in that, so I did end up filling that in and sitting him on top. And then I positioned the tentacles a bit. I thought I wanted to have him sitting up with a couple of tentacles up sort of in a waving position, but with the tentacles all bent over, it was really giving me that mechanical spidery thing with a baby head from Toy Story, the one that's in Sid's room. So I worked on the shaping of these and the positioning of them so that I wasn't getting so many baby spider vibes. And here I'm just, again, manipulating, smoothing, positioning the tentacles, making sure they're well attached to the body, that there's no strong seams, more smoothing, and now I'm happy with it. So I'm going to bake it at this point. And here is baked Ichika. You can see all of the imperfections are showing up a lot more, all the bumps on the body. I do think the ears could be a bit thicker. They're looking a little bit thin, especially from this top-down perspective. So I'm going to thicken those up, and then I'm also going to go over most of the body with an additional layer of clay that I can smooth out more. I'll try to remove some of those imperfections and just get it as smooth as I can before I bake it again. I'm really trying here to keep that base ear shape because I really liked the expressiveness of them that I'd already created whilst I thicken it up, which that was a bit tricky to do, but I'm happy with the overall outcome. I'll keep smoothing. Any big divots I'm going to fill in with additional clay. And once I have it as sort of smooth as I expect to get it at this stage, I'm going to work on these tentacles. So I'm just going to quickly make up these little tubes for the tentacles, work out how long I want them and where I'm going to position them on the body. I don't know canonically where they're actually positioned on Ichika or even on squids in real life, but from the reference images I've looked at, they appear to be more towards the front of the body, but on the sides. So I'm going to pop them in next to the side tentacles, and I'm just going to try and work out what position I want to have them in. Now I'll make the little, I have no idea what these are called, the little appendages on the end of the tentacles. They're not hands, but yeah, I'm going to make these little ends of the tentacles. And I will attach them onto the tentacles, which will distort the shape quite a bit, so I'll be working on that as I attach them, making sure they're nice and well attached. They're kind of like a flattened teardrop, nice easy shape to make. As I'm thinking about how I want to position the tentacles, I have to keep in mind the overall expression I want. So I've already got some expressiveness happening with these ears. They're on a tilt, so they're a little bit like cheeky, mischievous, maybe abashed, like a little bit shy. There's a lot of ways I could take it. So I'm trying to think, given the head tilt and the ears, how do I want to position the tentacles and what expression do I also want to put on? And I have baked Ichika again, but not the tentacles yet. I'm going to give Ichika a good sanding and get him as smooth as I can, remove as many of those imperfections as I can with sandpaper. There's a lot of little areas I can't get into with sandpaper, but I just do my best. Now I'm attaching those tentacles, smoothing out some of the areas I couldn't reach with sandpaper, and then excuse my very old pizza baking tray, but I'm going to position Ichika's tentacles here. I need to decide how I want them before I bake them. So I'm making a little support for them that will hold them in place, hopefully, while I bake them. I did learn the hard way whilst making some mushrooms for a friend for her birthday that even if you have clay covering something positioned, if it can sag in the oven, it will. So you really need to support it. So just fiddling until I find the position I want, and I've got to change the shape of this support a little bit so that I can get this other tentacle where I want it. At this point I have an idea in my head of the positioning I want. I've just got to keep manipulating it until it's in that position before I bake it. I also need to keep in mind to keep the tentacles themselves looking organic. I don't want any like harsh corners on them or anything. And here's the position that I decided upon. Ichika's all baked now, and I've let him completely cool off, and now I can actually get ready for painting. So I'm going to be speeding this up quite a lot. It took several layers to get to a point where I was happy, even just with the base colours. This first pass is me laying out where I'm going to be putting the colours. I changed the red pinky colour 3 or 4 times. The yellow stays pretty much that same bright yellow. The off-white that I use for the base stays that off-white. That limey green, I think that's closer to the reference images, but I do change that because it just didn't quite look right once I had it on with the red. It was giving me really strong watermelon vibes, so I did end up changing that. At this point, I've actually done 2 layers of the white and the yellow. Now I'm going to start adding on this pink. I'm not trying to be super clean and precise at this stage either, because I know I'm going to have to do a few layers. I don't want this deep dark pink all over the yellow areas because it's going to be hard to remove, but just getting it laid out where I expect it to be so that I can get an idea at this stage of if I like this color palette or if I want to change it up. Moving on to the green, perhaps you can start to see why I was getting watermelon vibes at this stage. It's just, yeah, as soon as you have anything that's like that rich pink and then you add a light limey green tone, I'm immediately thinking watermelon. And I really wanted to head strawberry like the reference is and like Ichika is. So I end up changing these colours quite a bit. Here's my second pass at a pinky tone, just trying to mix up something I'm happier with. My other colours aren't actually dry yet at this stage, but I just was not happy with the tone of that, so I tried a pinker colour. I thought it would match the reference imagery a bit better, and maybe I might like the lime green better with it, but I was still just getting watermelon from this. Like, add some black seeds on there and you've got a watermelon. Here I am adjusting that pink again. Lots more red added. And I was much happier with this colour. You can see just how much more of a red tone that is. The red's the predominant undertone rather than the pink. So I did, I don't know how many layers of this. It's quite opaque, but I just wanted to make sure that I'd got everything and I was happy with the coverage before I stopped. I think it was like 3 or 4 layers, like it wasn't a crazy amount. Moving on to the tentacles, I still wasn't happy with that light limey green. So I'm going to mix up a richer colour. I'm going to keep it light, but I just wanted to head more green than yellow. So when I think of a strawberry, I'm thinking red, and the leaves are a deep, rich green. And I wasn't going to go a deep, rich green because that would deviate from the reference images too much. But I mixed up this sort of tealy, almost tealy green, and I was happy with it for a base colour for the tentacles. So I'm just going to cover them all in that and see how I'm feeling about it at that point with the yellow and the red. I did a couple layers of that green and I was happy with it. And I decided I wanted a little bit more depth in between the tentacles. So using red, which is on the opposite side of the colour wheel to the green, I mixed that in to get a darker tone, and I'm just lightly applying that between the tentacles. It's not super obvious, it was just for a little bit of depth. Honestly, I'm not even sure you can see it in the final product, but I know it's there. So now you do too. Here I'm going to mix up a lighter version of that green because I wanted to add a little bit more dimension to the tentacles. Like, it's a 3D sculpture, but I don't know, I just struggle to just use flat colours on things. I like to add a bit more dimension and variation to the colours. So here I'm adding that lighter colour. I've picked a direction that I want the light to be coming from, and I'm just going to add it on the points where I expect that light to hit. And I'm just doing this very lightly, like more or less dry brushing it on, because I don't want it to be a really thick layer. I want it to accent on top of that other green. I'm going to do the same thing with the pink now. Since I've picked a direction the light's coming from, I just mixed up a lighter version of the pink, and I'm just popping that on where I expect the light would be hitting the most. Moving back to the green, I'm mixing a lighter colour again and lightly accentuating those points where the light would hit. Anytime my brush is actually on the figure, there's very little paint on my brush. Mixing up a lighter version of the pink again and redoing those highlights a bit more to get a little bit more obvious highlights. Mixing more white in to highlight further. And then going lighter again with that green. I really enjoyed this part of the process. Anytime I'm painting something, this is probably my favourite way to paint things. And then using just that lime green direct from the bottle, I'm going to do the final little hits of highlight. And going one shade lighter again with the pink, I just want to make sure that I'm highlighting the center of the face there as well, because I did leave that a little bit darker, and really lightening up the tips of those ears and the tentacles. I was so happy with how this came out. I just think it added so much. I was now moving on to fixing up the yellow, and I realised this yellow was heading in the wrong direction colour-wise, so I turned it into the off-white that I was going to use underneath of the tentacles for Ichika. And I used the lemon yellow and just added in a bit of that initial mix I made to make it a touch more opaque and a little bit less neon. I realised as well that there was yellow around the tentacles between the green and red, so I did several layers of this, just applying it where I thought it would go, and then using a dry brush and some water to just clean up any edges. I don't know how many layers of this I did, like I think 4 or 5 layers of this before I got it opaque enough that I was happy. Now I'm doing another layer of this off-white. I can cover up any mistakes that have occurred on the bottom of the tentacles here. I can clean up the edges between the green and the off-white, and just make sure that I'm really accentuating the shaping of the tentacles as well. This only took a couple layers on the bulk of the base. But where I'm cleaning up those edges along the tentacles, that took I think 3 layers in some cases, just to make sure that it was nice and opaque and a nice sharp line. And here's where I'm at the moment with the paint job. Because I'm pretty happy with that, I'm now thinking about how I'm going to do this face. So I grabbed a pen and some paper and I started to draw up some ideas. The first one was me trying to just draw up what general face is usually drawn on Ichika. The second one was more accurate to what his face actually looks like, but I realized I wanted to do like a winking eye, and so I was just working on getting the proportions of everything right to have that winking eye and the open mouth. I was really happy with the last one, so I cut that out and I'm just having a look how that looks on the face. Positioning it, I shifted it down a bit further because I realized Ichika's face is quite low. Here I am just tracing it with a little bit of paint. You could also use like a transfer paper to do something like this, but I figured paint would do the trick. Just tidying up any rough edges with that transfer. And I'm going to use these paint markers to actually do this face. So the only reason I use paint markers for this and not acrylics, well, they are acrylic paint markers, but I opted to use them over my acrylic paints I had out because they're a much more opaque paint, and also the fluidity of the paint is really high. So it's a really liquidy paint with high opacity, and that meant it was much easier to use to do these fine lines, particularly when the fine lines are such harsh lines because they're in black. I'm just using this big brush to do any little cleanups, chucking in a bit of light paint for the placeholder for the mouth. I liked the face, but I wanted to add a little something more. And one of my favourite things to do when I am customizing dolls is the blushing. It adds so much life to the face. So I thought I'll mix up a paler pink and then a pink that's a bit closer to the general skin tone, and I'll just dab on some blushing. So I used a dry brush for this. It's the bigger brush that I initially started using when I was painting because it's got really fluffy bristles. Just tidied up my black outlines, and that's how we're looking right now. I'm using the white paint marker to do these little dots for Ichika because again, it's a nice fluidy paint with a high opacity. I didn't want to have to do repeats of these dots because the more times you go over them, the more likely they are to get bigger and bigger, and I wanted some of them to be quite fine. The little ones I added as like freckles under the eyes. I wasn't too happy with the placement on this side, so I removed them as best I could, fixed up the blushing and then reapplied them. And then I was so much happier with them that I decided to do it for the other side. So the little under eye freckles changed and the blushing changed a little bit, but I think it was a good decision. I really like the outcome. I think it's a really cute addition. And if I can add freckles to a thing, I'm gonna add freckles. Now, I didn't even notice when this actually snapped off, but this arm snapped off because I was holding it out of the way to do the facial expression. It made it a lot easier to do the details on the underside of this tentacle, so I'm not too mad about it, to be honest. Just filling in that mouth with some darker pinks until I'm happy with that color. I changed the underside of the tentacle to that off-white because I initially did it in the yellow, and now I'm just as sort of carefully as I can with a dotting tool, drawing on the little lines of the underside of the tentacle. I used a big damp brush to clean up the outlines of the black as well a bit. I went back in with the off-white to clean this up a little bit. And off camera, I actually added on the suckers under the tentacles. I forgot to film that bit, but I just mixed up a slightly warmer off-white and I used the end of a pen to make the bigger circles. And then I just used the dotting tool to make the smaller ones and used the dotting tool with the off-white to fill in the holes. Super glued that tentacle back on. Now it's time to varnish. So I did 3 or 4 layers of this super glossy or high gloss varnish. I wanted a wet look for Ichika. I have made a My Little Pony Cthulhu before and I glossed that so that it looked wet. So I knew I wanted to do that as well for Ichika. And I actually realized after I'd finished varnishing that I forgot to put any eye shines on the eye that is open. So I added those in post and you'll see them in these final shots. What do you think of Ichika? I think he came out so cute. I'm completely in love with it. The pose, the head tilt, the little winky face, it's all just like I imagined. This was really fun and I hope you enjoyed watching it. I hope Spilled Ink doesn't mind me borrowing their mascot to have a go at making him. And I hope you'll join me next time for whatever I get up to for my next crafty project. Have a great day. Bye.